Hello and welcome to the study on Hinduism. We're continuing the series on witnessing to world religions. I'm your host, Benjamin Feagan. I'm an Ontario Conference pastor, and I'm here to share with you some of the things I've learned while being a missionary abroad and in India, as well as my study of Hinduism. So today we're going to go through a background of the religion and look at the deficiencies of the religion and see where we can make some bridges and win the hearts of many Hindus across the world, and especially in India. So as we look at this study, don't forget to like, comment, share if you think this video is great. If you have any questions or comments or even criticism, don't forget to share in the comment section below and let me know what you think. All right, let's take a look and let's get into this now. Hinduism. This is what we're looking at here, and this is what we call an idol. According to tradition, the Apostle Thomas brought Christianity to India. Though Syriac was used in liturgy, the Thomas Christians did not abandon their culture. Until today, they share many social and religious customs with their Hindu neighbors. Now, Seventh-day Adventists came to India at the end of the 19th century. By then, they had already developed a system of evangelization that was geared to English-speaking Christians. Many of the first converts were already Christians when Seventh-day Adventists came to India. Adventists in India, for example, tend to wear Western-style clothes, speak in English, sing English songs, adopt a Western lifestyle, and more importantly, they shy away from participating in the life of the community, as this world is not their home. Our educational institutions are seen as major culprits in the westernization of Indian Christians. So it's huge. There's some resistance. Around 1985, Dr. Brian Dalwis, a Sri Lankan individual, he returned from seminary at Andrews to teach at Spicer College. One of his burdens was to free the Indian church and its theology from Western influence. He started a series of publications under the banner Bullock Cart Theology. After his early demise, Bullock Cart Publications continued from the pen of Dr. D. Sankethamuni till he retired in 2000. Since then, no effort has been made in that direction. Sensing the need for a new approach to mission in India, the Southern Asian Division began a doctoral program in missions with the help of Andrews University professors trained in missions and in cross-cultural ministry. And so we have a heart for India. As Seventh-day Adventist Christians, we have a heart for India. And we don't want it to be just pushing a westernized Christianity, but a true Indian Seventh-day Adventist Christianity we want. It's not easy to give the history of Hinduism because it doesn't have a defined beginning and it has no specific founder or theology. Hinduism originated in the Indus Valley in modern-day Pakistan more than 3,000 years ago. When Arabs came to India, they called the land Al-Hind. India was the land of the Hindus, the land of many gods. Hindus are generally tolerant of other religions since they believe that all paths eventually lead to God, because all is God in their view. As there is no church of Hinduism, everyone holds their own spiritual, philosophical opinions. It's difficult then to understand someone's spirituality simply by looking at the religious trappings. So in India, it is more common to hear someone ask, "What is your sadhana, or practice?" than "What do you believe?" This faith is diverse, tolerant, paradoxical, multifaceted, and complex. It has been called the most difficult to understand of all religions, and also the most fascinating. Others refer to Hinduism as the most spiritual of all religions. Let's take a look at the history of Hinduism a little bit briefly. I'm going to share with you a slide here in a moment. As you see in this slide, you see there's a history from 3000 BCE all the way to 2000 CE, according to secular historians. And this is the general history of the beginnings to around the current time now, 1998. We're in 2024 right now as making this video. And so this just gives a snapshot for you to look at and consider if you're into history. The festivals in Hinduism, and there are many. The festivals in Hinduism are significant. Their elaborate ceremonies are built around sacrifices for gods. A common Hindu is very festival-oriented, not so much focused on philosophy. Philosophical Hinduism is the religion of the elite. In the picture you see, it's actually the Diwali festival. And here you have Indian performers dancing with swords during the Diwali festival in Auckland, New Zealand. So not in India, but in New Zealand. Here, this is the V.K. Bandarachari's Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowments page here. Now, I took a quote here from the Orissa Hindu Religious Endowments Act, 1969. In it, it says, basically Hindu religion, in the Orissa Hindu Religious Endowments Act 1969, it explains the Hindu religion, which includes the expression of the Hindu religion, including Jain, Buddhist, and Sikh religions, and the expression of Hindu and Hindu public religious institutions and endowments shall be constructed accordingly. That's what the law basically says, the act says. So in case you missed what I'm trying to say, is that Hinduism in India is looked at as part of in connection with Jainism and Sikhism. So and some would disagree and argue this, but according to the act, it's kind of lumped together as a family. These are some important Hindu terms that we should be aware of, that may also come up in this discussion. So just take note of it, and you'll understand. Okay. Another set of important Hindu terms which you should know. So just keep this in mind as I'm discussing. I'm going to use some terms. I'll try to remind myself to tell you what they mean. If I forget, just please keep this in your mind. Another word too is that I have an English tongue, so it's very hard for me to pronounce some of these words. Now these are the sacred Hindu texts. In the sacred Hindu text, you have the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Ramayana, Puranas, and the Brahmanas. So the Vedas are the 4 books of knowledge, and they're considered the most authoritative. And they've been compiled over about 1,000 years with no known author. They are a collection of hymns to various Hindu gods, and within that is the Rig Veda. It's a collection of hymns, and the Artha Veda, which is magical spells and charms. The Sam Veda or Yajur Veda are collections of ceremonies. They are books of supreme knowledge. Now the Upanishads, they are discussions of the idea that behind all gods is one ultimate reality, which is called Brahman. The mystic teachings are given by an ancient master, is the idea from the Upanishads. The Ramayana and the Mahabharata are the next 2 epics in the Hindu literature, which tell of the mythical incarnations of Vishnu. The Mahabharata, which is the great epic of India, is approximately 100,000 verse poem, and the most famous part, which is the Bhagavad Gita, which many people know. The Bhagavad Gita is the most popular of all Hindu texts and explains how to reach nirvana. The Puranas contain myths, lore, and legends of the Hindu gods. The Brahmanas, prose commentaries, are about sacrifices. There's the Dharma Sutras, the Dharma Shastras, which are religious law books, and they codify how Hindu society should be and how Hindus should live. The essential concept in it all is the Varnashrama Dharma. It's the duties and right way of living for each of the 4 classes of society, which are called Varnas, in each of the 4 stages of life. The ashramas, which include the ashramas, okay? The Dalits are outside of the 4 Varnas. Now, in this picture, you're seeing like a finger pointing to different boxes. And the point I'm trying to get here is that Hinduism is a collection of religions based on the worship of different idols, numbering in their millions. It's basically idolatry with a loose structure. It's a designer religion. You get to pick and choose who and what you want to worship. Its absoluteness is alien to them. Absolutes are viewed as narrowing a range of human consciousnesses. This idea is encapsulated by the statement, "What is right for you is right for you, but what is right for me is for me." Now that sentiment should remind you of sort of the attitude, especially in North America. We have this pluralism and we have this tolerance, which is all about, well, what is right for you is right for you, but what is right for me is for me. And that's the same concept that comes from Hinduism. You worship your idol, good for you. I worship mine, good for me. Now Jesus' statement says, "I am the way, the truth, and life, and no man comes to the Father but by me." This can be an offensive statement to Hindus because the statement expresses an absolute truth of the one way and not many ways to God. And we fundamentally believe as Christians that there is one God, Jesus Christ, the Savior of the world, who bled and died for our sins. So Hindus are happy to consider Jesus to be one of many avatars or incarnations of the impersonal Brahman, remember the master entity of the universe, but they do not accept him as the only incarnation of God. And that's where they stumble. Here you have some idols, and some important idols. The Hindu scriptures are full of the adventures of numerous gods and heroes. The Vedas tell of Agni, the god of fire and sacrifice, Indra, the sky god of war, and Varuna, the god of cosmic order. The two great Hindu epics, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, weave their tales around Rama and Krishna, the most popular of the 10 avatars, which are the incarnations of or forms of Vishnu. Hindus are waiting for Kalki to come, kind of like how we are hoping for the second coming of Jesus. For masses of Hindus, the solution of their problem depends on assistance from a deity. For Shaivites, Shiva and his consorts are sources of help. For Vaishnavites, Vishnu and his avatars respond to human petitions. Now, I like this quote, which says, "Every great story seems to begin with a snake." And it seems to be true. When you go back and you compare all these different religions, you seem to always see some snake imagery or some snake involved. So let's take a look. Here you see on the image an idol, and this idol, picture idol, has lots of snakes on it. Snakes play an important role in many of the world's religions, and in the Hindu religion, the Nagas, or sacred snakes, have the power to be both protective and destructive. Vishnu is often pictured seated on the seven-headed snake, Shesha, which protects him from evil. In Sri Lanka, this painted wooden mask of a Nagarasa, or snake demon, is worn in dances to chase away the evil spirits thought to be responsible for sickness. This is a portable shrine of Vishnu, and it shows Vishnu under the protection of Shesha the serpent, with Krishna Avatara and his half-brother Balarama. Now, both of these are the Vedanta systems, meaning that they are based on the teachings found in the Vedas and the Upanishads. Yoga comes from the Sasvatavada system. Within the system, these are the four schools. There are different schools, There are different schools. And in the different schools, you'll have the two broad philosophical systems. Okay, you have the Sasvatavada, which is the externalism, physical actions that the worshipper does. It's about the works. There's the second, which is about nihilism, which focuses on escaping into a life of contemplation. So in Hinduism, you can look at two broad philosophical ideas, and they're right here. This is it. And next, you have the slide here. You have three portions here, the Advaita, Dvaita, and Advaita. The Advaita is all about non-dualism. It's a philosophy that deals with the existence of one great reality. Dualism is Dvaita, and it's philosophy that believes in two contradicting forces in the cosmos, so, like good and evil. The last one, the third one, is a modified dualism. The philosophy holds that there are many gods that lead to one ultimate reality. And so all division disagree with all these are divisive, and all of them disagree with each other. The common Hindu is unaware of these divisions. Now, as we continue on, another question that comes up, well, what is Hinduism? Is it monotheistic, polytheistic, or pantheistic? In one sense, Hinduism is monotheistic in that it recognizes one supreme deity known as Brahman, or the ultimate reality, and Brahman is the universe and all it contains. In other words, God is everything and everything is God, and that's a belief known as pantheism, that everything includes us as part of Brahman, and that means we are also God, right, according to their thinking. Hinduism has no concept of a personal, knowable God who is separate from his creation. Brahman alone is all that exists. In another sense, Hinduism is polytheistic, with the worship of multiple deities, though they are all considered manifestations of one ultimate reality. Brahman is personalized as three separate entities: Brahma, which is the creator, Vishnu as the preserver, and third, Shiva as the destroyer. Most Hindus also worship Krishna and Rama, which are two of Vishnu's 10 incarnations, or avatars. In addition to the forces of nature, animals, and humans, these can all be deified, giving Hindus a pantheon of, get this number, 330 million gods and goddesses to worship. That is just mind-boggling. So take a look at this picture. I think we all recognize who this person is. It's Donald Trump. Hinduism is a religion of pluralism and moral relativism. It will go as far as to accept and integrate other gods of other religions. For example, Jesus can be worshipped too, as he is considered one among many. Since God is in everyone and everything, even famous people like Donald Trump can be worshipped. Busa Krishna in this picture, who's a farmer, he called President Trump his God and stopped eating after Mr. Trump became infected with the coronavirus. His family said Busa killed himself by fasting for Donald Trump. Here's another picture here. Hindus go so far as to worship trees and rocks. So in the picture on the right, you see a tree being deified, and on the left you see a stone being deified. It's just incredible how far individuals will go to worship. This is an important quote from India's first Prime Minister. He said, "Hinduism as a faith is vague, amorphous, many-sided, and all things to all men. It's hardly possible to define it, or indeed to say definitely whether it is a religion or not. In the usual sense of the word, in its present form and even in the past, it embraces many beliefs and practices, from the highest to the lowest, often opposed to or contradicting each other." Now, in my prior lessons and studies that we have had together so far in witnessing to world religions, you find that in Jehovah's Witnesses, Latter-day Saints, in Islam, and in other religions, there's these contradictions. And so you can't have two opposite things being correct. So there's got to be error and there's got to be lies. And so when I see all different kinds of contradictions across these different religions, it tells me that there's definitely some untruth and some disingenuity being practiced here. And so when I see this quote from India's first Prime Minister, it tells me enough to say that we should be on guard and wary about this particular religion. Babylon, in the Bible, we read is Babel, and it can mean gate of the gods. It comes from Babel, gate of the gods. So a place of many idols. And the Hebrews called the city Balal, which is a word in their language meaning to confuse. And so if I'm going to look at Hinduism in a Christian sense, in a Christian perspective, it's confusion. It's the gate of the gods. It's filled with confusion and idolatry. Now, there's different ways we can apply Babylon, and Babylon, actually, when I think of it, it does refer to many of the world religions today. But we also know in Bible prophecy there's another application for that, and we won't get into it now. But in Revelation 17, we'll tell you enough about that woman, Babylon, and what she represents today. Now, Babylon, confusion, and it truly is confusion. When one person can believe one thing and another person can believe and practice another thing and yet still be called Hindu, it can be confusing. Where's the standard? Loose standards. I don't know. Where's the standard, right? Mahatma Gandhi, he said, "My Hinduism is not sectarian. It includes all that I know to be the best in Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and Zoroastrianism. He says, truth is my religion." Now, in my opinion, if you're picking and choosing what you want to believe from all these different things, basically you're picking a designer religion. You're just choosing what to believe and just doing what you want to do. I guess that's a religion, but it's a pretty loose one, and it's a pretty self-serving one in my view. In this picture, you see Hinduism and Islam basically in a picture being contrasted. I want you to notice in the picture on the right, the Islam, or for Muslim here, has devil horns on his head. So what is the story behind this? Why do Hindus have this perception of Muslims being like the devils? Well, Hindus had their first encounter with Islam in 712 AD, an invasion into India where Muslims slaughtered thousands of Hindus and destroyed their temples. From this event and many other events, Hindus came to regard Muslims as demons. Although Hindus are generally tolerant of other religions, the absoluteness and violence from Muslims in the past has been appalling to Hindus, and they therefore hate Islam with a passion. Now, I'm not saying they all hate Islam, but I'm saying there's a general dislike and disregard for Muslims amongst the Hindus in general. Not everyone, but in general. Conservative Brahmin Hindus say that Muslims act without dharma. Dharma is the single normative principle that determines religious, ethical, practical, and behavioral attributes. Dharma prescribes for individuals and group tasks, morality and rules for social behavior or religious practice. Hindu elites view Muslims as loveless devils who act without a moral compass. They view Muslims as a threat to peace and the free worship of their idols. And so this comes from their past relationship with them and what's happened in the past. And so there's been a lot of hurt. And so they throw up that wall. Muslim, they don't like. So as we will see later, Hindus can also be charged with acting without dharma against people of their own religion. So yes, they have a tendency to demonize outward, but they also have a tendency to demonize each other and to hurt each other. In this image, you have the caste system. The Aryans trace the origins of the caste to Brahma himself, The four varnas, or colors, are first mentioned in the Rig Veda, which describes the caste coming from the body of the divine primal giant, Purusha, the divine manly being, as you see here. The Brahmins came from his mouth. The next came from his breast and arms. And you keep on going. The Vaisyas from his thighs, and the Shudras, or Harjans, from his feet. Hindu society is based on a caste system which ranks people by their occupational class. The Brahmins are the priests, the venerated by the lower castes, and so they are venerated and protected by the local courts. Their social benefits hinder them from becoming Christians. It's too cushy at the top for them to become Christians. They therefore become spectators, appreciative of Christianity, but don't convert. Kind of like Mahatma Gandhi. He wanted to be a Christian, but he didn't make the full change. The next in that picture that I showed you are the soldiers and king warrior class. The next after that are the merchants, farmers, laborers, and craftspeople. And the Harjans, or the Shudras, which are the last, are the untouchables, the Dalits. So the higher a person's caste is, the more that person is blessed with benefits and luxuries that life has to offer. Although the caste system was outlawed in 1948, it still is important to the Hindu people of India and still is recognized as the proper way to stratify society. As the caste system gradually developed, it was a gradual development. And so because the Sanskrit word for caste is varna, meaning color or complexion, one suspects that the original distinctions were racial, or at least based on some skin color. The Dravidians were mostly dark-skinned, like the people of South India today, while the incoming Aryans were taller and light-skinned. The position in society and occupation also played a role in the stratification and the caste system. Eventually, there were the four main castes, which I've shared with you now. The castes are divided and subdivided until today. There are over 2,000 subcastes. In addition, there are many who fit no specific caste who are called scheduled castes, or sometimes outcasts. Although the government of the democratic India has worked hard to do away with caste, it has proved to be stubbornly ingrained in Indian society. Its origin and involvement in Hindu beliefs gives it a religious sanction in a way. Here's an article, and it's an important one, a portion of it anyway. And it's Human Rights Watch, and it talks about how the caste system has something to do essentially with women being abused, specifically the Dalits. The caste system was a byproduct of Hinduism. Dalits were people who did evil in their past lives and were reincarnated later as at the lowest level. So they're reincarnated at the base, the very bottom. And so Dalits are often looked at as subhuman and deserving of poverty, deserving of the worst, deserving of humiliation and suffering that they're in. Dalits, previously known as untouchables, fall at the bottom of India's complex caste hierarchy and have been facing discrimination and persecution by privileged caste groups for centuries, despite strict Indian laws to protect the community. Dalit women are often sexually abused, forced into prostitution, and there have been attacks on them, and those attacks often go unpunished. Some of them have reached the news in most gruesome ways. In February of 2021, Divya Pawar, 35 years old, left home after a dispute with her husband to visit her parents, a Dalit woman. As she waited for a bus in rural Salpur in India's western Maharashtra state, two dominant caste men, one of whom was a police officer, stopped and offered her a ride. What a great man, right? Well, we'll find out. It was far past that, very contrary. However, instead of taking her to her parents' house, they abducted her and locked her in a tin shed on a farm belonging to one of the men. Out of earshot for miles around, and over the next 5 days and 4 nights, the two men sexually abused her repeatedly. Eventually, they called her husband and informed him she could be found at a hotel half an hour from his house. Disgusting. Once home, Divya's husband asked her to perform a purity test. The ritual involved pulling a 5 rupee coin out of a pot of boiling oil. A pure woman would be able to pull the coin out without burning herself, her husband assured her. The husband, recorded a video of her attempting to pull the coin out. Within days, the video went viral in that village via WhatsApp, and an activist stepped in to help Divya and registered the first information report, FIR, to register a first information report, which is called an FIR, the first of many steps to see justice served. This is one of the examples of the abuse that poor Dalit women have undergone in that country, all because of a caste system based on religious fundamental beliefs from the Hindu system. Rituals and symbols are important in Hinduism, and here on the slide you can read more about those rituals and symbols. I don't want to get into it too much because I wanted to get into soul winning as well in this presentation. Now, this is one of the most terrible abuses in India. It comes from this idol. New temples to the goddess Sati have been constructed in many of India's greatest cities. The goddess is depicted as a multi-armed woman sitting on a bed of flames. The legend goes that Sati flew into a burning fire and ended her human life. And from this idol, we get the terrible abuse of widow burning. Hindu wives share their husband's destiny. They fast for their husbands frequently to ensure their salvation and in turn ensure their own. Women are managers of the household and seek the husband's and children's welfare. A wife is considered to be obedient and subservient to her husband. This principle is taken from the story of Sita, the wife of Rama. When colonists took control of India, they noticed a disturbing practice among the Hindus. Sanskrit describes the practice of sati in precise terms such as sahagamana, going together with one's husband, or anumarana, following one's husband in death. Sati is the ritual according to which a Hindu wife follows her husband to his death by ascending his pyre with him or sending one of her own shortly afterward. It is the suicidal burning of the living widow along with the corpse of her husband. Now, this practice has been outlawed. Colonialists outlawed the practice among Indian states during the 1840s, but it still goes on today despite the outlaw. And it's so sad. When you think of these abuses, it comes from paganism. It comes from putting idols and putting nature and putting things of the world before God, Jehovah, the God of love. And so it leads to all these abuses. When we begin to uplift nature above the Creator, it leads to all kinds of abuses, and it leads to the total weakening for respect for humanity. And it's terrible. It leads to the abuse of women. There's a saying in India, basically, cows are worth more than women. That cows are more important than women. And it's craziness. Women are so important. Men are so important. Human life is so integral and important. And it needs to be protected. Now, sun worship is prevalent in India. It is the wine of Babylon, sun worship. And it's been known. Sun worship is known in India. It's one of the many idols and the chiefest one, as it gives life to everything. Sun worship commenced with the rising of the sun, when the ancestors would offer water and lota, a rounded copper utensil with a wide edge. And poured water would create a flowing film, creating the 7 colors of the spectrum, through refraction by which the sun would be gazed at indirectly. Hindus believe this is helpful to the eyes, vitalizes the body, and purifies the mind. The Rig Veda states that sun is an energy source for all living beings. And so the sun is elevated. According to the Hindu calendar, the week starts with Sunday. It is the day of the Surya Devta, as per the Hindu tradition. It is the day when Surya and all the other gods and goddesses are worshipped. Sun worship. Here you see in this picture some water and some burning pyres. When people die, they cremate the bodies in the open near rivers and bodies of water. And they perform what's called sraddha, which is the reverence of living and dead elders. In the Bhagavad Gita, we read, "For the soul there is neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. He is unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain." So what is the purport in this? It's basically that there's no eternal death. The idea that the soul or the human continues to live on, that the soul is naturally immortal. This is the wine of Babylon. As Christians, we believe in conditional immortality, that God gives us immortality at the end of the world. The next is the wine of Babylon, the natural immortality of the soul. This is the wine of Babylon. Here you see this wheel, and then there's a cycle of life on it. It describes the samsara. The samsara is an endless cycle of birth and rebirth until one obtains liberation in Brahman. Samsara means wandering or world with the connotation of cyclic, circuitous change. The cycle of rebirth is fundamental in both Hinduism and Buddhism. Hindus believe in reincarnation, that the soul never dies, but the soul continues in some other form. A human is a soul who wears in succession many different costumes or avatars. Each is appropriate to a human's current condition. When a soul reaches its destiny, it has no need for costumes. The problem for humans, as Hindus understand it, is an immortal soul that continues to inhabit one body after another and after another until it is freed from the wheel of rebirth. The soul is bound to the revolving wheel through karma, its own choices and thoughts, karma and deeds. Hindus believe that each individual has a soul that continues to have the same identity in the next life. With each new life, the soul learns new lessons, though it also suffers from the sins of the previous life. A better soul reincarnates after death in another body, and if at last the soul, after many reincarnations, is purified of all selfishness, it attains what's called nirvana and is no longer reborn. Hinduism also teaches about the spirits of people manifesting themselves after death. However, these spirits are not reincarnated souls, but ghosts of people, without physical bodies, spirits of people who died before their time, typically by tragedy. So what is salvation for Hindus? Well, for Hindus, the goal of life is to break away from the cycle of rebirth. Here is a crazy article about menstruating women cooking food that will be reborn as dogs. That's what a Hindu religious leader said. It's crazy why they would say that. It's not very nice. Now, these are some fundamental teachings on heaven and hell. Hinduism does not teach in a literal heaven and a literal hell. It's pretty evident from what I shared with you about the reincarnation. Hinduism has no concept of sin against a holy God. Instead, it teaches that man's greatest problem is his ignorance that he is God. In Hindu belief, since Brahman is all that exists, everything else is ultimately illusion, or maya. Our material world, our physical bodies, and our personal existence are all illusions. In essence, then, our ignorance is equivalent to the fall of man. And so we've forgotten that we are a part of Brahman and have attached ourselves to the desires of this individual self. So you have to break away from it all. That's the idea. That's the goal in salvation. In Hindu religious thought, there are two basically broad streams or ways of salvation or life. So there's the way of the monkey, which is the clinging by action for protection from its mother. It involves asceticism, good works, and sacrifices. Your activities connects you with God. That's the illustration, like a monkey clings to its mother. There's the way of the kitten. It's calling out to mom for help, and it must be carried to safety. The whole idea is that in the worship experience, or the salvific experience, the worshiper invites deliverance, love, and invites the love of God and deliverance from him. It's not passive because with time, kittens become active and independent. It's passivity to activity. The ideal of salvation is the fusion of the individual with the absolute. In this fusion, there is the abandoning of one's individuality and attaining supreme consciousness. And so there's no one orthodoxy or way of salvation, since Hinduism is very pluralistic. There are many ways, or many marga, to reach the goal. And I'll mention only the four, okay? So let's get into it now. There's Jnana Marga, the way of knowledge. This way attempts to reach a higher consciousness until finally realizing Brahma. It's achieved through study, philosophical writings, yoga, and deep meditation. The disadvantage of this is that it's all in one's own strength. It leads to the neglect of family and responsibilities. Karma Marga is the way of action or salvation. That deity alone is the origin of all activity. That getting wisdom by action, sacrifice, and ritual acts, fulfilling your duty in the world, but not tying yourself down to the world. Selfless deeds, selfishness entangles the person in a cycle of rebirth. The disadvantage is that it's all about what man can do. It requires radical demands, stripping away desire and longing and everything that results from them. It's about giving up a wish for one's salvation. It's too hard for a simple man on the street to really do. Now the next is Bhakti Marga. Really, it exemplifies the way of the kitten, so to speak. It's the way of devotion. It's the most popular way. It's about experiencing the love of God. Being loved by God is the central view. And this is all accessible to everyone. The central prayer is reception of Bhakti and the realization of it. It's a reciprocal movement between God and man, or between idol and man. It's about a personal relationship, a relationship that leads to action. And there's some important points I also want to bring up. It basically doesn't require intelligence or wisdom. It just demands devotion to a chosen deity. There's the yoga, which is involved in all of this, which precedes the bhakti and is used to unite man to God in devotion. Yoga is the directed physical attempt to help man to draw closer to God. And yoga is more popular in the West than really it is in the East. It's kind of fascinating about that. Bhakti Marga is all about acts of worship to any of the numerous gods or avatars. You do it in the home, you do it in a temple, and worship is primarily done individually rather than as a congregation. And most Hindus worship daily through offerings, rituals, and prayers. This is a quote from Gavin Flood, and I find it pretty relevant. One striking feature of Hinduism is that practice takes precedence over belief. What a Hindu does is more important than what a Hindu believes. Hinduism is not creedal. Adherence to Dharma is, therefore, not an acceptance of certain beliefs, but the practice or performance of certain duties. Here you see in this picture hospitality. Basically here, for when you look at it, Hindus view guest as God. It's the idea is that you want to be showing hospitality, and by showing hospitality, it's like you are basically recognizing God in the person, that you're being a good host to a human being. In Christianity, Christians are repentant sinners. For Muslims, they're like the obedient slave. For a Hindu, they're a host. When feeding the hungry and unexpected guests, it counts as a sacrifice to deity. Hindus invoke God as a guest, and so God is a receiver and man is a giver. In the Vedic tradition, sacrifice is important. And by sacrifice, or showing hospitality, or showing gratitude, and giving petition is important. In the Vedic tradition, the whole idea is that hospitality shows gratitude, and it gives petition for more assistance. A sacrifice is given to deity, and man receives something in return. So you expect when you do hospitality, there'll be something that comes back to you, karma or otherwise. When a Hindu worships, it's a service of hospitality. The Hindu gives to get in return. Salvation is all about giving and receiving, treating God as a dignified guest worthy of lavish gifts and kind treatment. So the center of all religious life is the home. All sacraments are celebrated there. The individual is the vehicle of all religious activity. And there are these 16 services called upakaras, and they can be extended even to 94. It's incredible. Here you see a picture of the mother cow. The sanctity of the cow in Hinduism is the belief that the cow is representative of divine and natural beneficence, and should therefore be protected and venerated. The cow has also been associated with various deities, notably Shiva, whose steed is Nandi, a bull; Indra, closely associated with Kamandinu, the wish-granting cow; and Krishna, a cowherder in his youth, and goddesses in general, because of the maternal attributes of many of them. Vegetarianism is important. And so for caste Hindus, vegetarianism mainly signifies three things. Signifies caste purity, ahimsa, non-violence, non-killing of animals, and distinction from the low-caste Sudras. They view meat eating and drinking alcohol as associated with impurity and low-caste activity. Humanity is seen as a victim of three things: avidya, ignorance, illusion, and pleasure. So we're a victim of these three things in the Hindu mindset or view. There's really no sin in Hinduism because there's no law, really. It's a pick and choose design of religion. And so Indians see nothing sinful at all in eroticism and sex. They see the very act is considered in terms of good or bad karma or actions, which in turn determines better or worse reincarnations. Their solution to the sin problem, so to speak, or those three aspect problem, the ignorance, illusion, and pleasure, their solution to that is confession, repentance, austerities, prayers, fasting, and giving gifts to the poor, and temples. Hindus long for redemption through an absolute. They recognize the world is in a fallen condition and that we all need help. They understand man's faults and ignorance, and they want knowledge of transformation and to be transformed. Here's a comparison between Hinduism doctrine and Christianity, and you'll see where we depart in very strong ways. So here's about the worldview in absolute. Here's Shiva. He's depicted with 4 arms and hands extending from his shoulders. The upper hands hold a drum, and a flame symbolizes the force of creation and destruction. Remember how I said Shiva is also the destroyer, right? So this destroyer also creates and holds a drum and likes to dance. It's really interesting. And so they refer to Shiva as the Lord, and the Lord Shiva dances within a circle of fire, representing the incessant dancing energy that supports the action of the universe. And the Lord Shiva in his worship by Swami Sivananda writes about how Shiva is beautiful, has a necklace of skulls, a drum, and is very scary to look at, and has serpents for earrings. Kind of reminds me, the descriptions in the Bible about Satan being very beautiful, Lucifer being very beautiful, but also being very scary because he's the destroyer. Here in occult theocracy, we read that Shiva is the destroyer, basically representative of the devil. And it brings among us the understanding of, well, the devil, that this is a fear idol that has drums and snakes involved in its presentation. The snake symbolizes evil, and the trident symbolizes punishment of 3 kinds, according to the Shiva worship. There's this punishment of the spiritual, the devic, and the physical. So here are some evidences of spiritual fraud which I think are relevant. In this religion, instead of uplifting and dignifying humans, Hinduism seems to degrade people into castes and appears to really belittle women. It can go to other extremes of the worship of man who was created in the image of God. So as a designer religion and a pick and choose type of thing, it resides on all types of extremes based on the individuals involved. You pick and choose what you want to believe. You have a get along to go along faith, so you have this extreme inclusivity, yet also being antagonistic towards Islam. You can choose to be saved by your works or saved by a generalized belief, like a folk Christian or folk Hindu. There's a lack of consistency overall. One Hindu can believe one thing and another can embrace something totally opposite. And rather than figuring out which is right and which is wrong, the truth becomes whatever belief is held by each person. Just you do you and I do me, and let's just be cool friends. That's the way it goes. And the idea of reincarnation basically absolves people of suffering and destruction. Basically, you can keep on sinning and sinning, and you'll just continue to live through multiple reincarnations. And there's also this false hope involved with that. And also you have sun worship or Sunday sacredness. And this is why I think Christianity is better. There's the worship of a God who cares so much that he sent his son to die for us. Awesome, right? He was morally and holy and upright. And he presents an ultimate he presents an ultimate end to sin and suffering. In Christianity, you maintain your own personality in Jesus. There's no fusion with the absolute where your personality is gone. It dignifies and uplifts and protects women and marginalized people. There's no recognition of caste, and all are equal in God's view. There's no life of extreme renunciation. It encourages the fulfillment of family responsibilities. There's no running off to pursue a greater spirituality at the neglect of your own family. There's true rest in Christianity, not a place of nirvana or reabsorption into the great Atman, but rest with a true friend and savior in the new heaven and new earth. India is where most Hindus reside. It's a land of longing. It's an empire of dreams. It's an enchanted world. Beautiful place. But God has yet to be found. There is an unknown God which they need to worship, Jesus Christ. So in approaching Hindus, you need to unite on common values. And here's a list of common values here that you can look into and seek to emulate. Here's a strategy for witnessing in India. An example. Be the acharya. Be as the religious teacher. Live as a role model, right? And be able to reason from Hindu texts in the Bible. But don't be argumentative and rude. Be a vegetarian. Don't drink alcohol. Don't smoke. And don't have loose morals. Like, be an upstanding person. Prove to the community that you love the country, people, and customs, and yet you're a practicing Christian. Just because you become a Christian doesn't mean you all of a sudden become a Westerner. No. Have a non-sponsored platform like a school or tutoring center where you can teach others. And do some mission ventures on the weekends, and demonstrate that you're not focused solely on converting people alone, but you're interested in the welfare of other people in society. On weekends, offer social services. Involve professionals in giving those services. And be geared towards improving the community, not just for proselytizing. And establish your family as a well-established community workers. Be patriotic, culture-loving Christians, and good citizens. Here are some doctrinal bridges which you can exploit. I don't want to go into all of them because it'll make this video too long, but here it is for you, okay? Take some note and see how you can win some souls. Here you have some more doctrinal bridges on destruction by fire, a new body, deliverance, and salvation from a Savior. And in your messaging, make sure you share that there is an absolute. It's not Brahma, it's Jesus Christ. Share how Jesus can transform a life. And share that we are all ignorant and fallen, and we need a perfect Savior in His perfection. Share that Jesus prepares us for heaven, that He rose from the grave and He promised us resurrection. And Jesus will promise He will destroy sin and the devil. There will be an end of sin, and we won't be constantly reincarnating into a sinful world. And next, be aware that being too absolute will be off-putting. Represent that absolute Jesus in your words and actions. Next also, look at Mahatma Gandhi's quote here. He says, "I like your Christ, I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ." So the message, we are living letters, read and known of all men. So be the Christian, be the good example, and you will win souls to Christ. They will see something different and lovely in you, and they'll be drawn to you. Here Mahatma Gandhi, he reveals a little bit. He says, "The message of Jesus, as I understand it, contained in the Sermon on the Mount, the spirit of the Sermon on the Mount competes with the Bhagavad Gita on fairly equal terms," he says. "For the mastery of my heart, it is the sermon that endeared Jesus to me." So you may perhaps want to preach or teach on the Sermon on the Mount for Hindus, I mean. He says, "Although I cannot claim to be a Christian in the confessional sense, still the example of Jesus' suffering is a factor in the makeup of my fundamental belief in non-violence that guides all my worldly and temporal actions. Jesus would have lived in vain and died in vain if He did not teach us to direct our lives according to the eternal law of love." So what's attractive to the Hindu? The eternal law of love, Bhakti Marga, or the way of devotion, and uplifting Jesus Christ as the non-violent one, the absolute arbiter of truth and the absolute example of non-violence. That's a perfect example. Jesus. Conversion is a difficult process for many Hindus. And here's why, is that when someone gets baptized and they begin to take on the Christian lifestyle, they're viewed as anti-national people when they do that. Hindus consider converts to Christianity as disloyal. Now, consider these barriers and how you would address them from a Bible study interest. Beef eating, worship style, non-use of tilak, and excessive social mingling, and Western religion. So you have to address these things, okay? Have to know some answers to these. You have to also address Christianity as a threat to Hinduism, Christians as unpatriotic, religion of the poor caste, conversion destroys caste, conversion evokes the wrath of gods. You have to address all these things. Consider these problems that face converts, ostracism from family and society. And so when you win a convert, you have to be prepared to support him, her, or their family. And you have to address backsliding. You have to also address jeopardizing their witness in their own community. And you have to be aware of causing hatred towards Christianity. Be very careful and gentle. And so this is our lesson and study on Hinduism. If you have any questions or comments, or hey, if you like or don't like this presentation, let me know, and I'll do my best to address and to have a dialogue with you. So I hope and I pray that you will be able to win your Hindu friend, and that you'll be able to share that something better, which is Jesus Christ, the one and only God. May God bless you and your witnessing endeavors. Peace be with you. Amen.